you very much. It's always a pleasure to be in Singapore. Every time I come here, I see that there's always a lot of changes around Singapore. Something new is being built, something around the buildings, around the city has changed. So it reminds me how fast things are changing in the world around us. And it sort of reminds me of my career as well. I started working in Asia 20 years ago. And when I come to think of it, the biggest technology platform at the time when I started working in Asia was the fax machine. So it probably tells a lot about my age here, but it's actually quite scary. And to see all the amount of changes that we have seen over the last 20 years. And certainly when I see just in the last few years how much change we have experienced in the world and certainly around this region, it's really astounding. Phones are now the biggest selling computing device. Desktop are no longer the biggest selling computing device. A huge change in the ecosystem. The reality is that now the world's biggest internet market is Asia, not the West. It is this region. It is true that the world's largest smartphone market is this region. Millions of lives of people in this region have changed thanks to the internet. And they will continue to change thanks to the internet because the changes are continuing to happen at an incredibly fast pace. And when changes happen so fast, it is really critical for everyone to be bold. It is critical for everyone to take risks, to be a little crazy. Often in this situation, crazy moves sometimes win and sometimes lose. But I can assure you that playing safe will always lose. So what do I mean by crazy? Well, I mean Google buying Android in 2005, essentially at a time when the world phone market was dominated by Nokia operating system and the BlackBerry operating system. I mean Google buying YouTube in 2006, now for what many people said was a very hefty price at the time, when the world's video market was really in its infancy and we didn't have the ability to really store a lot of videos in the cloud as we do now, thanks to many different services. I mean Apple launching iTunes and completely disrupting the music industry. I mean Apple launching the iPhone and getting people to change the way that they're considering smartphones and the way that they're using smartphones. I mean Samsung, only a few years ago, betting that they could beat Apple by building on top of Android. I mean Elon Musk, betting that people would buy electric cars. All of these bets seem incredibly obvious to all of us now, but back then they weren't. They were really crazy bets. Well, I'm going to tell you today that we need to get crazier in Asia if we want to support the thirst for knowledge and information of this region's population. The building that you see behind me here didn't exist 2.5 years ago. It's one of our data centers, the one in Singapore, which we launched only last month, or opened only last month at the same time when we opened a data center in Taiwan. 2 years ago, when we started planning for the building, we did not think that we would see the growth in Asia booming at the level we have. It was very difficult to predict the explosion that we saw across all of the markets. Now, take Japan, for instance. Just 2 years ago, only 7% of Japanese people had a smartphone. Today, over 60% of Japanese users have a smartphone. In Korea was more advanced at the time. 30% of Koreans had a smartphone 2 years ago. Now 3/4 of them do. In 2010, there were 100 million internet users in India. Now there are 200 million internet users in India. It took the US 6 years, more than double the time, to get past those two milestones. The growth really is changing the nature of the internet. Now, if I look at a casual example, sports, for instance. In 2010, cricket and baseball roughly had the same amount of search queries at a global level. In 2013, thanks partly to the growth of the internet in India, we see that there are 25% more searches for cricket than there is for baseball at global level. In 2010, Psy, which was mentioned, I think, earlier today, only had fans in Korea, a country of 50 million people. Now, you can see that Gangnam Style has almost 2 billion views on YouTube. The information consumption, information creation is really booming throughout the internet. Every 2 days now, we create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization to 2003. Every 2 days, we create as much information. It's far from over. Yes, there's growth in devices, and we all know about it. Now, there'd be at least 10 billion mobile connected devices in 2017, essentially more than the population of the planet. But all these devices, all these smartphones are not the only devices that will get connected. Everything is now going to get connected. The number of connected devices is going to grow 7 times over the next 8 years to 75 billion. So here's my turn to sound crazy. Asia isn't digitizing fast enough. So if you look at devices and connection, Asia is digitizing faster than any region in the world. But people in Asia want Asia to digitize more quickly and differently. Asians are not getting the internet that they deserve. The users in Asia demand a new approach. This is how I know that Asia's changes are leading globally and that Asian users are demanding a new approach. Our users in this region transformed Google in just 3 years. You see here some of the products that users in this region actually changed at Google. Google Search, YouTube, Maps, Android. Of course, engineers all around the world have been working on these products. But the reality is that it's the users in this region that change what product meant to them and where they fit in their lives. Now, Korean users, for instance, transformed YouTube. Korea was the first country in the world where mobile views of YouTube exceeded desktop views. Japan followed. Now in Singapore, we also do have more views on mobile than we do on desktops. These countries are redefining where and when you watch content on a video-based format. Similarly, Asian app developers and users really have transformed Android. Now, you might all think that it's the Asian manufacturers that had the biggest contribution to the Android growth that we've seen over the last several years. Well, far more significant to us are the app developers and the way people are using smartphones in this region. In 2011, our top markets outside the US for app downloads on our Google Play stores were Korea, Japan, and India. 3 years ago, app developers in this region were only developing for their markets. Now they are developing for the world. Even search has changed. Now, Google Now is a product that I love and use every day. It is the product Asia demands. I can give you an example created by one of our Japanese engineers. You're at a bar, your phone rings, essentially tells you that you need to leave in 5 minutes, otherwise you're going to miss your bus. It's cute, but it's what Asia demands. Asian users have their mobile phone with them at all times. They expect information that's going to be useful to them to bring more quality to their life, to bring ease of use with everything that they're doing. So you really need to focus outside of the devices that they're using and the moments that make the user experience delightful. Right now, the problem that we have is that the web doesn't look like Asia. We need to make sure it does, for instance, on maps. In many of the fastest growing markets in this country, there's a problem. Users want the internet to do everything for them, but the information is not on the internet yet. They want to build their own internet as fast as possible. Now, map being a great example. The map that you see behind me is a map of Manila that was made thanks to millions of edits by Filipinos of their own town. Why did they do this? Because it improves lives, because it saves lives. And I'll show that further in a moment. It can help in elections, it can help in disasters, and it can also make a big difference to small businesses. What's also important as well is to reset the balance of languages on the internet. Now, I was delighted to hear earlier that the BBC has a global presence and a very impactful presence in Asia. But how much of that presence is in local languages? I would say that most of it is probably in English languages, where we need to reset the balance of languages across the web. Punjabi, for instance, is spoken by over 100 million people. But really, you wouldn't find much in Punjabi on the web. The content available is really poor. So we added Punjabi in a Google Translate product recently to help users to get more value out of the content that is currently available on the web, mostly in Western languages. Publishers and governments in this region have a big role in supplying content in the languages of the new wave of internet users. They're all coming online. They're coming online from this region, and they deserve to have content in their own language. And that's as true of rich countries as aspiring countries. Yesterday, the first top-level domain in a Japanese script was launched. I think this is fantastic. Now, if you think that typing those letters here on a keyboard is a problem, just think of a Japanese user that has had for years to type .co.jp in a Japanese keyboard to get to a Japanese website. Well, the domain here that we've launched spells min-nan, or everyone in Japanese. And essentially, we will be able to license this domain now to anyone who needs to use it. And particularly, we think it's going to be very useful to community sites and others to create websites along the lines of run everybody or cook everybody and drive a new wave of content creation in Japan. The launch of top-level domains in non-English letters won't just open up the web to new possibilities. It will make it easier for Asian users to access the content that they want and easier for them to remember addresses. But more importantly, the web needs to be for every Asian. The difficulty that women face accessing the internet in emerging markets is incredibly painful. Of the estimated 200 million internet users in India today, only a third of them are women. What's more, only 14% of Indian women living in rural areas have access to the internet. Indians' gender gap is larger than those of most developing countries in this region. Closing it is really critical, and it's a task that is really all upon everyone here in this room. The knowledge that the internet can provide can dramatically increase the standard of living. Better access to information about health, about finance, can really help drive the economy in each of the countries and obviously save lives, decrease infant mortality rate, for instance. That's why we've launched an initiative to help women get online with several partners in India. And we aim this year to bring 50 million Indian women online by the end of 2014. So we've already reached out to 100,000 women across 300 schools, households, and 50 villages across India, 500 kilometers away from Delhi and in the southern provinces. And we've essentially showed all these women how to use the internet, how to educate themselves through the internet, and how it can improve their lives. This is really critical to me because I truly believe that Asia has the potential to transform the world's internet, not only Asia's internet, but Asia has the potential to lead the transformation of the world's internet. Most of what you see on the slide behind me could not have existed 5 years ago. They all represent Asia's new path forward. What happens when we digitize politics in Asia, for instance? Well, on the top left there, you see the map showing polling booth locations, incidents, rallies in last year's Philippine election. The map was built only by volunteers using Google Maps Maker tool over a period of 5 years. We then subsequently worked with the Filipino government to ensure that all of the polling booth locations were correct. It's not only the Philippines. Japan also changed its laws recently to allow politicians to campaign on social media. In Indonesia, very close to here, we've seen that the president did a televised Google Plus Hangout to interview officials about the bushfires that were covering this region in smoke several months ago. And what happens when governments themselves digitize themselves? Well, much more than in the West. Taiwan and Japan recently made all of their emergency data available so that other people can build apps that can alert their population when bad events are occurring, typhoons for instance, and help them find shelters. Now, it means that Google Now, a product I mentioned earlier, can easily alert you if a typhoon is approaching and help you find a shelter. That's truly amazing because only 3 years ago, these same governments didn't trust the internet to provide critical information to their population. Now, for instance, when the Japanese government released information about the tsunami that hit Japan a couple of years ago, all the information they released was in PDF format, inaccessible really through the web. Now Asian governments really see the release of data as an enabler to all of their population. It's really important as well because it's going to enable the cultures in Asia to expand to the rest of the world and expose the rest of the world to all of the beauties that exist here. We've always had a feeling, unfortunately, that globalization meant westernization. Well, thanks to the internet, we don't have to believe that equation anymore. YouTube shows this in a small way with entertainment. Now, small media markets are using the internet to generate more and more local content and cultural exports. 90% of the K-pop videos from Korea are viewed outside of Korea. You can see there on the bottom right the picture of a skirt from the Hunan province in China. We've worked with museums all across this region to digitize the content to provide access to everyone at a global level to the content that exists in those museums. What happens? Well, it happens that people now have access to this content, and many people visit these websites and learn about the culture, but also visits to these museums increase as a result, which is really positive. The demand is there. We just have to ensure that we provide content to people so that they can access it. And obviously, the biggest benefit can be seen with schools. The Philippine government has put the entire school system on Google Apps. The government of Malaysia is looking at equipping the entire student body of this nation with Chromebooks. YouTube is essentially fast becoming an educational tool. I know of an Australian professor who puts his lecture on YouTube and has more than 1 million followers. Most of his views are from India. Essentially, that's our part in the educational transformation. But we shouldn't really be too obsessed with devices. The focus should remain on what people can do with them. How can we give teachers the best resources and the easiest ways to reach students? So that's what happens when we have the ability to digitize Asia. The question is really, why doesn't everyone do it? And why doesn't everyone seize the opportunity? I think a few shifts need to take place. Firstly, the new Asian user needs need to be met by all the companies working in Asia. The Western internet user is weird. Now, take me, for example. I grew up, the internet didn't exist. Then I started using the internet on a desktop. Then I started using the internet on a smartphone. Then tablets came, and I started using the internet on a tablet as well. I'm a model. I'm nervous when someone is giving me my Chromebook Pixel and I need to move the screen. It feels very foreign to me to move the screen on a laptop computer, where my kids have no problems with that. Why would you build for someone like me? In Asia, it's very clear. The internet is the foundation, will be the foundation in emerging markets, and has always been the foundation in markets like Korea and Japan. It really defines everything else. When people ask me about the impact wearable devices will have in this region, I say, it's easy. In this region, we know. The way that Asians use smartphones, it's like they have wearable devices already. These devices are providing them on a constant basis with all the information they want. Secondly, Asians need to think more globally. 3 years ago, Asian developers developed exclusively for their home market. That was mostly due to technical limitations and regulations, not because of talent. It seems that the smartphone then was a technology that was invading Asia. Now the truth is that in 2014, Asia understands the smartphone better than any of the Western countries. In 2011, the top 3 Asian-built social networks in Asia had most of the users in domestic markets. In 2013, the top 3 Asian-built chat apps, Line, KakaoTalk, and WeChat, are designed for the smartphone and have over 800 million users, with the majority of it coming outside of the domestic market. This is how every Asian business should be thinking. Thirdly, digitization has to mean more than devices and connections. A connection is only as valuable as what it connects to. Now, we've seen in disasters and elections how the liberation of government data can change their lives. We've seen this in Japan. We've seen this in the Philippines. Asia needs more of that. For the Asian internet to look more like Asia, it will take more material from national archives, maps, government, offices of governments, educational texts, museums, businesses. It will take more national platforms that can host that content, and it will take laws that will support them. Finally, the world needs to recognize that the internet is mainstream in Asia. The West looks less and less normal when it comes to how users behave. Asian users are inventing the world's future thanks to the internet. Thank you.